Namaskar and hello out there. Abhidevananda here, and yes, you guessed it, still hovering over the Ocean of Bliss. The Ocean of Bliss, not the Atlantic, not the Pacific. The Ocean of Bliss, and the weather is great. Not too hot, not too cold, just right, in my opinion. Today, I want to say a bit about unity. Unity and the various plans for unity that are currently on the table. There are 4 of them, albeit the first 3 are very similar in nature. But let's go through them one by one. Let's start with the Hindis. Their plan is very simple. They claim that their reactionary all-Hindi office in Ranchi is the legitimate Anandamarga Pracharaka Sangha, AMPS, and that everyone in India and around the world should submit to their dogmatic, Hindu-like imperialism. What they aim for is not so much unity as hegemony, domination rather than leadership, much less unity. As for Plan 2, the plan of the Bengalis is really just the same as that of the Hindis, although the locus standi differs a bit. Where the Hindis pretend legitimacy on the basis of a weak historicity, the Bengalis claim legitimacy on the basis of Indian legality. Legality and not Charya, the Anandamarga social code. In short, the Bengalis implemented a legalistic coup based on some early articles of incorporation that happened to occur in the Indian state of West Bengal. It was a filthy maneuver that has since been replicated elsewhere in the world, notably in the USA and in Australia, but never significantly expanded the sphere of influence of the Bengali group. Both the Hindis and the Bengalis have been far more successful at creating division than unity. And this brings us to plan number 3. This is the plan of the miscellaneous Indians, those who are neither Hindi nor Bengali. In point of fact, this group, the miscellaneous Indians, might have some independent significance inside India, but on the global stage, they do not. And so, in its earliest expression within our global Anandamarga, the miscellaneous Indians were always lumped in with the Hindis. Basically, the Indians were delineated as either Bengali or non-Bengali. And so when the first rift came, the first schism came, it was basically the non-Bengali Indians, NBIs for short, who rejected the Bengali Indians. But without the Bengalis, the miscellaneous Indians soon went to war with the Hindis. But what is Plan 3 really? The plan of the miscellaneous Indians, or MIs for short. It is really the same as plans 1 and 2. We will dominate. But having no ostensible grounds for asserting primacy, the miscellaneous Indians, the MIs, had to employ a more covert, a more underhanded approach, primarily economic clout and deception. And so they tend to rear their ugly face only in the form of amorphous entities like the Third Front, Way Forward, EC, and most lately the Telegram scammers. Of course, internally, they also have their power structure, but it is less blatant than that of the Hindis and the Bengalis. They like to pretend that they have a way towards unity, but that way is just the same as the Hindi and the Bengali way. They pretend to be the wise and legitimate leaders, but of course they are not. And on the contrary, their words carry little or no meaning, because these people are consummate liars. The only significant truth I've seen coming from this group lately was an implicit admission on Telegram that all of their previous plans for unity were totally bogus, totally impractical. And finally, this brings us to Plan 4, the one and only practical and universal solution. It originated in 1997 at Anandanagar. It started out as a means of preventing the impending Bengali breakaway, the impending fragmentation of the Margis, but when presented to the various political leaders of Anandamarga at that time, on all sides of the then political spectrum, it was roundly rejected. Though naturally left unsaid, the four-step plan, hereafter referred to as the 4SP, did not adequately satisfy the political ambition of those various individuals. And of course, it still won't do that, any more than a world government will satisfy the ambition of all the top politicians in all the countries of the world. After all, as said in the USA about a different set of Indians, the Native Americans, Anandamarga had back then and still has today too many chiefs and not enough Indians. But despite this lamentable fact, to this day, the 4SP remains on the table and the only practical way forward, the only practical way to restore and maintain unity in Anandamarga. So let's examine briefly the 4 steps of the 4-step plan. But first, let us look at the underpinning of the 4SP. The foundation of the 4SP is a recognition of Baba's theory of Prama. Baba taught us that for progress there must be Prama, dynamic, equilibrium, and equipoise. Baba taught us that this dynamic equilibrium and equipoise is always built on triangles of forces, and the first challenge is to identify the triangles, the 3 sides of each triangle. In all the sessions I attended where Baba raised the subject of Prama, no one was ever able to identify any triangle. But with respect to Anandamarga, it seems that Baba has himself identified the primary triangle that still exists today, and the way to go forward while keeping that triangle in balance. And so the 4SP is built on the methodology employed by Baba himself for managing AMPS. Largely a non-dogmatic, but still formulaic system of postings. So what are the 4 steps of the 4-step plan? Step 1. To ensure advancement toward universalism, Ananda Vishwa Parivar, the formula system for cultural blending must be maintained in respect to both postings and important elections, and there must be progressive changes in the formula. With respect to elections for central or global committees and boards, each of the main social groupifications, currently Bengali Indian, non-Bengali Indian, and non-Indian, must have a reserved percentage of seats, and each groupification will elect its own representatives. I think this point is pretty clear. When Baba was still with us, we didn't have any need for global boards and committees, but we had them in name only. Baba himself made all the decisions, and sometimes those decisions were declared in the name of a board. After Baba left physically, we had to start electing boards and committees that at least theoretically had ultimate power. But we applied no system to those elections, and ultimately we ended up with no functional boards and committees, and indeed no functional organization. Step 2. Anyone who has been a recognized Acharya for a very long time, for example, 25 years, may be considered to be an elder Acharya. And as a one-time process for constituting an adequate startup pool of Parodas, all such elder Acharyas must be recognized as Paroda forthwith. If any of these qualified persons do not have all of their lessons in Vishesh Yoga, they may be categorized as acting Paroda. Acting Paroda until such time as they have received all of the Vishesh lessons. However, these acting Parodas will have the same voting rights as any Paroda. This point recognizes the importance of the concept of Paroda per Charyacharya. Even in Charyacharya, it is clear that the Paroda is largely a political concept. But it also has a spiritual base as well. Unfortunately, nowadays, and indeed ever since Baba left, and we first began to hear about so-called Parodas in Ananda Marga, only the political and ethnic aspect of Parodaship has been apparent. To amplify the spiritual element and reduce the purely ethnic and political element, the simplest approach will be to once more apply the same sort of formulaic system that Baba used. This will be accomplished with step 3 of the 4-step plan. The expanded body, this is step 3, the expanded body of Parodas must conduct new elections for the Central Committee, Paroda Board, and Paroda Pramukh. The new Central Committee will have a minimum number of members. Why would it need a huge body consisting of representatives of the 3 main groupifications, that is Bengali Indian, BI, non-Bengali Indian, NBI, and non-Indian, NI. The proportions of representation should be determined by such factors as number of acharyas, number of ethnicities, number of nations, number of language groups, and so on. So, for example, if the Central Committee has 18 members, the proportion of representation might be in a ratio of 1 Bengali Indian, 2 non-Bengali Indians, 3 non-Indians, or any other ratio, of course. In other words, there might be 3 Bengali Indians, 6 NBIs, and 9 NIs as representatives, but naturally, the elected representatives of any groupification may be from any ethnicity, not necessarily the ethnicity of the electing groupification. In other words, the non-Bengali Indian Parodas are at liberty to elect Bengali Indians or non-Indians as NBI representatives. The Paroda Board will consist of 1 Bengali Indian representative, 1 non-Bengali Indian representative, and 1 non-Indian representative. In addition to the Paroda Pramukh. So basically the non-Indians, the non-Bengali Indians, and the Bengalis, each groupification will elect its own one representative, and then the Paroda Pramukh must be elected according to a system that ensures acceptance by all of the three main groupifications. Must be elected in common. All of the groupifications must agree to the person who is elected as Paroda Pramukh. The Paroda Pramukh must receive a majority of yes votes from the Parodas representing each of the three groupifications. The rest is pretty much according to Charya Charya. The primary duties of the Central Committee are public service and the propagation of Dharma. To facilitate this end, the Central Committee must go on making regular, progressive changes in the formula for cultural blending. The primary duties of the Paroda Board are creation of the maximum number of Parodas, maintenance and elevation of the standard of Parodas, and resolution of any complicated problems or serious controversies that arise in the Marga. The Paroda Pramukh is the chairperson of the Paroda Board and the ex officio president of the Central Committee. Now the last step, the last part, I should say, of step 3 is just a distillation of what we find in Charya Charya as given by Baba, and there's not a lot new there. By step 3, we could actually elect a genuine and meaningful Paroda Board and Paroda Pramukh instead of the mere rubber stamps that we have had for the last 30 or more years, with only the one exception wherein the MIs, the miscellaneous Indians, plotted a coup with help from the then so-called secretary of the Paroda Board, which is in fact a non-existent position in the first place. But finally, this brings us to step 4, which seeks to implement genuine and functional Tattvic, Acharya, and Avadhuta boards for the first time by following a similar approach. With such boards, Tattvic, Acharya, Avadhuta, and Paroda, freed from the noose of ethnicity, we can finally start to oversee and improve the quality of our cadre. So step 4, Tattvics, Acharyas, and Avadhutas must conduct new elections for their respective boards. Those elections will be conducted in a rational fashion, with appropriate reservation of seats for the elected representatives of each of the 3 main groupifications. So people may say many things about the 4SP. Surely its political opponents will try to give it a bad name, will project their own defects upon the 4SP. But there is one thing they cannot say. There's one thing that they cannot claim in respect to the 4SP, at least not to anyone who actually knows something about the plan. They cannot say that it is impractical. It is absolutely practical. It is an approach to achieving a sentient unity rather than a static unity. Yes, one day in Ananda Marga there may no longer be a triangle of forces to hold in balance. One day, I don't know. We might actually have a central office consisting only of ethnic Hindis or ethnic Bengalis, and that central office might still manage to represent everyone in an even-handed fashion. But that day is definitely not today. But yes, Virginia, there is a solution. It requires only a willingness to share power. That practical power-sharing plan is called the four-step plan. This four-step plan is well known to all the players on all the sides. Of course, none of the Indian groups and their non-Indian groupies can endorse it because they still lust after unearned and unmerited power. But if any of those hypocritical posers pretend not to know this longest-standing proposal, or perhaps still worse if they try to pass it off as groupism, then that only exposes their insincerity. You know very well that it is neither impractical nor groupism. So if any person in power, no matter how petty, tries to dismiss the 4SP without employing logic and just ascribing to it a demeaning epithet, then you may easily understand that person's lack of character. Signing off once more from the Ocean of Bliss. Namaskar.